I would be optimistic on the basis of the hypothesis I'm suggesting to you that if the Chinese can continue over the next quarter century to sustain the kind of economic growth that they have mounted over the last quarter century, they too, even at the national level, will begin to democratize and liberalize, which does not necessarily mean that their specific form of liberal democracy will look like yours here in the Netherlands or ours in the United States, but that is not the point. The point is that I believe they will move in a direction that both they and we will recognize as distinctly more liberal and more democratic. If that sounds optimistic, that's because it is. This entire line of thought running from material progress to political, social, ultimately moral progress is very much a form of Enlightenment thinking that grew out of a tradition that always had at its foundation a fundamental optimism about the human enterprise. The second implication, though, of the hypothesis I'm outlining to you is, I think, more sobering, because if I'm right that such matters as tolerance and democratization and opportunity depend not merely on how rich a society is, but on the widespread sense of forward progress in people's material living standards, then no society, no matter how rich it becomes, is ever immune from seeing its fundamental democratic values placed at risk anytime the broad bulk of the population understands that its standard of living is stagnating. The third implication of this hypothesis that I would like to outline is one for economic policy. One frequently hears that in matters of economic policy, and especially in matters of policy that bear on an economy's growth rate, the optimal, the best stance for the public authority is simply to stand back and let the market take care of the problem, and to assume that whatever is the market-driven outcome is on that account the optimal outcome. The idea is that individual families will decide what they want to save, and individual businesses will decide what they want to invest. The implication here is that if the connection between economic growth on the one side and tolerance, generosity, fairness, democracy on the other side is valid, then the optimal rate of economic growth is different from, specifically, it is faster than the growth rate that the market left to its own devices would produce. The reason is somewhat analogous to the argument that we normally think about for matters like pollution. We're all familiar, I think, with the standard argument about why market forces left to their own devices will over-provide things like pollution and noise and congestion. The reason is that there's no reason why I, as an individual driver of an automobile, would take into my internal economic calculus the effect on other people of what comes out of the tailpipe of the car that I'm driving. The final implication of this hypothesis that I would like to draw is the most fundamental of all. It is that in my country certainly, but I think elsewhere as well, we need to change the way in which we conduct our public conversation about economic growth and about policies that either contribute to economic growth or impede it. It simply is not true that the only benefits that economic growth distributes to the population and to the society are material ones, and likewise it is not true that all of the moral considerations are on the negative side of the balance. Economic growth, in the sense of sustained, broadly distributed increases in living standards for the bulk of a society's population, have in one country after another shown the connection to increases in tolerance, democracy, opportunity, mobility, democratic freedoms, fairness. And we value these characteristics of a society not just socially, not just politically, but in moral terms as well. And there is a very rich tradition of Western thinking that has done so for a very long time. And as a result, it is simply not true to think that the right way to conceive of issues of economic growth is a matter of moral benefits, or material benefits versus moral drawbacks. The moral benefits are an important part of the story as well. I believe that certainly in my country, but I believe in others as well, and around the world, if we could reframe the public sector discussion, conversation about economic growth in a way that recognized these important principles, then we would not only be getting it right intellectually, which is always important, but as a practical matter, we would then, in many countries, certainly in mine, I believe, have a better chance of moving in the direction of genuinely growth-promoting policies. Thank you very much.